The impossible rescue at Clearwater Lake transformed a teenage runaway into a protected member of America's most feared criminal organization in a matter of hours, changing her destiny forever. The sunset painted Clearwater Lake with strokes of orange and gold, reflecting off the water like dancing flames. Beneath the old wooden pier, Jessie huddled with her thin arms wrapped around her knees, watching the ripples lap against the weathered posts. At 17, she was small for her age, her dark hair unwashed for days, her clothes worn thin from months on the run. Her backpack, containing everything she owned in the world, sat beside her like a faithful companion. Her stomach growled angrily, a painful reminder that her last meal had been half a sandwich from a gas station dumpster yesterday morning. The gnawing emptiness had become a constant companion, almost as reliable as the fear. From her hiding place, Jessie could see the sprawling lake house perched on the hillside, its windows gleaming in the fading light. Cars worth more than most houses lined the circular driveway, their polished surfaces reflecting the sunset. The sounds of laughter and music drifted across the water, accompanied by the tantalizing aroma of grilled steaks and seafood. Her mouth watered involuntarily, the hunger becoming sharper, more insistent. Men in expensive suits mingled with women draped in jewelry that caught the last rays of sunlight. Bodyguards stood at strategic points around the property, their stance and vigilance betraying their purpose despite their formal attire. Jessie knew enough about the world to recognize power when she saw it. These weren't ordinary rich people. The way they carried themselves, the deference shown to the silver-haired man at the center, spoke of something darker. She should leave, find another place to hide for the night. This wasn't her territory. An instinct warned her that these were dangerous waters, both literally and figuratively. Yet exhaustion anchored her to the spot. A woman in a white swimsuit appeared at the dock, her graceful figure drawing Jessie's attention. Unlike the others in their formal wear, she seemed carefree, her long auburn hair cascading down her back like liquid copper. The woman dove into the water with practiced ease, her body cutting through the surface in a clean arc. She began to swim with powerful strokes, moving further from shore, away from the party, and toward the center of the lake. Jessie watched with a mixture of envy and admiration. The woman moved through the water with such freedom, such confidence, like she had never known fear or hunger, like the world had always been a safe place. Everyone should know how to swim, her mother had told her years ago, during one of the few happy memories Jessie could still recall. Water can save you or kill you. Respect it, but don't fear it. Those swimming lessons at the community pool felt like they belonged to someone else's life now. Before her mother's illness, before the foster homes, before she became invisible to the world that had once seemed full of possibilities, the woman was quite far from shore now, her white swimsuit a small dot against the darkening water. Something about her strokes seemed different, less smooth, more frantic. Jessie sat up straighter, a flicker of concern rising in her chest. Then the white dot disappeared entirely. One moment the woman was there, the next, nothing but ripples spreading across the previously calm surface. Jessie held her breath, waiting for the woman to resurface. 5 seconds passed, then 10, 20. Jessie's heart began to pound against her ribs. People couldn't breathe underwater, not even rich, beautiful people who belonged to dangerous men. Something was very wrong. Jessie glanced toward the house. The party continued, oblivious to the drama unfolding on the lake. No one was watching the water. No one had noticed the woman's disappearance. No one but her. 45 seconds now. Still no sign of the swimmer. Jessie's hands gripped the rough wood of the pier. She should stay hidden. These weren't her people. This wasn't her problem. Getting involved could only mean trouble. Yet she couldn't tear her eyes away from the spot where the woman had vanished. A full minute had passed now. Even strong swimmers couldn't hold their breath that long unless they were trained. And the woman's final movements had suggested distress, not deliberate submersion. Jessie looked at her backpack, everything she owned in this world. If she left it to help, someone might steal it. If she took it with her, it would drag her down in the water. Either way, she risked losing everything. With a groan that was part frustration, part resignation, Jessie made her choice. She kicked off her worn sneakers and shoved them into the backpack, pushing it deeper under the pier where it might remain hidden. The water was colder than she expected as she waded in, goosebumps rising on her skin. Taking a deep breath, she dove forward, her body remembering the motions her mother had taught her so long ago. She swam with desperate speed toward the spot where she'd last seen the woman, pushing past the burning in her lungs and the ache in her muscles. Every second counted now. it might already be too late. When she reached the approximate location, Jessie took a deep breath and dove beneath the surface. The lake water was murky, visibility limited to a few feet at best. She forced her eyes open despite the sting. At first, she saw nothing but greenish darkness. Then, a flash of white. The woman was below her, unmoving, her hair floating around her face like seaweed. Something had entangled her legs. Old fishing line anchored to the bottom. Jessie dove deeper, her ears popping with the pressure. The woman's face was ghostly pale, her eyes closed, bubbles no longer escaping from her lips. How long had she been down here? 2 minutes? 3? Longer? With burning lungs and trembling fingers, Jessie fought to untangle the fishing line wrapped tightly around the woman's ankles. The thin filament cut into her own fingers as she pulled and twisted, desperately working against time. Her chest felt like it would explode, her vision starting to darken at the edges. But giving up meant death for the woman, and somehow, that had become unthinkable in the span of these frantic underwater moments. Finally, the last strand came free. Jessie wrapped her arm around the woman's waist and kicked hard toward the surface, her muscles screaming in protest, her lungs begging for air that was still too far away. When they broke through to the air, Jessie gasped, sucking in oxygen with desperate gulps. The woman remained limp, unresponsive. Getting her to shore was an entirely new battle, one that seemed almost impossible with Jessie's rapidly fading strength. "Help!" she screamed toward the house, her voice thin and ragged. "Someone help! She's drowning!" But the music and laughter continued unabated, her cries lost in the distance and the ambient noise. Somehow, through sheer will and adrenaline, Jessie managed to drag the woman to the shore near the dock. The woman's skin was blue-tinged, her body unnaturally heavy, completely devoid of the grace that had captivated Jessie earlier. "Hey!" Jessie shouted again, as she pulled the woman onto the pebbled beach. "Your friend is dying. Help." This time, a man near the edge of the gathering turned, his eyes widening as he registered the scene by the water. Within seconds, people were running toward them. The silver-haired man reached them first, his face transforming from confusion to horror as he fell to his knees beside the motionless woman. "Anastasia!" he roared, the name tearing from his throat. He began compressions immediately, his large hands pressing rhythmically on the woman's chest while another man tilted her head back. Push, 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 breathe, over and over with desperate precision. 9 minutes underwater. It seemed impossible that anyone could survive that. Jessie stepped back, suddenly aware of her soaking clothes and the circle of dangerous-looking men surrounding the scene. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to disappear before questions could be asked. Her backpack was still hidden under the pier, but her legs wouldn't move. She stood frozen, watching the resurrection attempt, silently willing the woman, Anastasia, to breathe. The silver-haired man's expensive suit was soaked now, his composure cracked open to reveal raw terror beneath. "Come on, Stasi," he begged between compressions, his voice breaking. "Don't leave me. Fight." The tenderness in his words was at stark odds with the hardness in his face, with the scars visible on his hands as they worked to restart her heart. A terrible eternity passed in those moments. Then, suddenly, Anastasia convulsed, water spewing from her mouth as she gasped and coughed. The silver-haired man turned her gently to the side, allowing the lake water to drain from her lungs. The crowd exhaled collectively, a sound of genuine relief rather than the theatrical concern of those merely observing tragedy. These people cared about the woman. They weren't just associates or employees. This was family of some kind. Anastasia's eyes fluttered open, confusion and panic evident in her expression, until she focused on the silver-haired man. "Nico," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What happened?" "I was swimming and then fishing line," Jessie said, the words escaping before she could stop herself. Every eye turned to her, and she fought the urge to shrink away. "It was wrapped around your legs. You were caught on something down there." Nico's penetrating gaze settled on Jessie, taking in her ragged appearance, the fear evident in her stance. "You pulled her out?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft. "You saved my wife?" Jessie nodded, suddenly very aware that she was standing before someone of significant power while looking like a drowned rat. "I was sitting by the pier when I saw her go under," she explained, the words tumbling out nervously. 9 minutes, one of the men said, checking his watch with disbelief. "Boss, she was down there for 9 minutes at least. It's a miracle." He looked at Jessie with new respect, perhaps even awe. This kid's a hero. Anastasia was being helped to her feet now, wrapped in someone's jacket, color returning to her face. "Bring her to the house," she said, her voice stronger than seemed possible after what she'd endured. "The girl. Bring her in." Jessie took an instinctive step backward. "I should go, my backpack," she began, but Nico raised his hand, silencing her with the simple gesture. The authority he commanded was palpable, extending well beyond the boundaries of his property. "Your name," he said. It wasn't a question, but a gentle demand. Despite his soft tone, Jessie knew with absolute certainty that refusing to answer wasn't an option. These people operated by different rules than the ordinary world. "Jessie," she replied, trying to keep the tremble from her voice. Jessie Reeves. The name was only partly a lie. Reeves had been her mother's maiden name, not the one on her birth certificate or foster care documents. Nico stepped forward, his eyes, a startling ice blue, studying her with unsettling intensity. "Jessie Reeves, you gave me back my world today. That debt will not go unpaid." He gestured toward the pier. "Go get your backpack. Then come up to the house." For a moment she considered running, grabbing her things and disappearing into the woods before they could stop her. But something in Nico's expression told her that wasn't a real option. Besides, where would she go? Back to hunger and fear and hiding. As if reading her thoughts, Anastasia spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "Please, Jessie, let us thank you properly. A meal, at least. You look like you could use one." The kindness in her eyes was genuine, surprising given her ordeal. With reluctant steps, Jessie retrieved her backpack from beneath the pier, clutching it to her chest like armor. When she returned, a man in a black suit, clearly security, escorted her up the path toward the sprawling house on the hill. The interior of the lake house was even more opulent than she had imagined, with soaring ceilings, marble floors, and artwork that probably cost more than everything Jessie had ever touched in her life combined. She felt painfully out of place. Anastasia, now wrapped in a plush robe, her hair towel-dried but still damp, sat at a massive dining table. Despite her near-death experience, she maintained an aura of elegance. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair beside her. "Eat." A plate piled high with roast beef, potatoes, and vegetables appeared before Jessie. The aroma alone made her dizzy with hunger, but she hesitated, years of street survival making her wary of unexpected generosity. "It's not poisoned," Anastasia said with a small smile. "Though I understand why you'd wonder." She nodded toward the food, her eyes gentle but insistent. "Please, eat. You need your strength." Jessie took a cautious bite, then another, then found herself devouring the meal with barely contained desperation. The flavors exploded on her tongue, almost painfully delicious after weeks of dumpster scraps and stolen gas station snacks. While she ate, Nico spoke quietly with men in suits in the corner of the room. Their conversation was hushed but intense, with occasional glances in her direction. Jessie pretended not to notice, focusing instead on her plate. "How old are you, Jessie?" Anastasia asked, sipping a glass of water, the ice clinking against crystal. Her hands trembled slightly, the only visible sign of her ordeal besides the unusual pallor of her skin. 17, Jessie answered, debating whether to lie but deciding against it. Something told her these people would know. 18 in December. She didn't mention that her birthday would pass unmarked, as it had for years now. Anastasia's eyes narrowed slightly. "And where are your parents? Your family?" Her tone remained casual, but the question was pointed, direct. No dancing around difficult topics here. "Dead. Foster care. Then I ran." Jessie kept her answers clipped, mechanical. The less detail she provided, the fewer threads they could pull. "Been on my own for about 8 months now." Nico returned to the table, taking a seat at the head. His presence changed the energy in the room, the air becoming somehow thicker, charged with an authority that needed no announcement or validation. "Foster care," he repeated, the words dropping like stones into still water. "Which means there are people looking for you. Official records. Paperwork." His tone betrayed no judgment, merely a clinical assessment of facts. Jessie's stomach tightened despite the wonderful food. Probably not very hard. I wasn't anyone's priority. She'd learned early in the system that some kids were more adoptable than others. At 17, she'd aged out of desirability. "The last family," Anastasia prompted gently. "You ran from them. Why?" There was something in her question. Not mere curiosity, but genuine concern, as if the answer mattered to her personally. Jessie's hand instinctively went to her ribs where the bruises had long since faded, but the memory remained vivid. Mr. Peterson drank. Mrs. Peterson pretended not to notice. I got tired of being his punching bag. A muscle twitched in Nico's jaw, the only change in his otherwise impassive expression. These Petersons, he said, the name spoken with quiet venom. Where do they live now? What does it matter? Jessie asked, suddenly wary. I'm never going back there. I'll disappear again if I have to. She pushed the now empty plate away, fight-or-flight instinct beginning to override her hunger and exhaustion. Nico exchanged a look with his wife, a silent communication born of years together. You won't have to, he said simply. But my organization functions on information. Knowing things is how we survive. Your organization, Jessie repeated, the euphemism hanging in the air between them. Look, I appreciate the food, but I should go. I've caused enough trouble. She began to rise, reaching for her backpack. 9 minutes underwater, Anastasia said, stopping Jessie with those 4 words. The doctors my husband called while you were eating confirmed it's medically impossible to survive that long without permanent brain damage. Yet here I am. A miracle, one of the men by the door murmured, crossing himself. The gesture seemed out of place in this realm of wealth and implied violence, yet deeply sincere. The girl is blessed. She brought the dead back to life. Nico's ice-blue eyes remained fixed on Jessie. I don't believe in miracles, he stated flatly. I believe in debts, in balance sheets. You saved something irreplaceable to me. That creates an obligation I take very seriously. I don't want anything, Jessie insisted, uncomfortable with the weight of this unexpected debt. I just did what anyone would do. The words sounded hollow even to her own ears. She knew very well that most people wouldn't have risked themselves. But you're not anyone, Nico countered smoothly. You're a girl with courage, loyalty, and skill, who has nowhere to go and no one to protect her. These are problems I can solve if you'll allow it. The offer hung in the air between them, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Jessie clutched her backpack tighter. I don't even know who you people are, she said, though she had her suspicions. A ghost of a smile touched Nico's lips. We're family, he said simply. Sometimes by blood, sometimes by choice, sometimes by necessity. We protect our own. We honor our obligations. We never forget a debt or a betrayal. The implications were clear enough. And you want me to become family? Jessie asked incredulously. Just like that? Because I pulled your wife out of a lake? Because you showed loyalty to a stranger when it cost you everything to do so, Nico corrected. Because you risked your life without calculation or expectation of reward. Those qualities are rare, and in my world, invaluable. I'm giving you a choice, Jessie, Nico continued, leaning forward slightly. One night of safety, a good meal, some clean clothes, and enough cash to get you to the next town, or a permanent place here, protection, education, opportunity. The offer seemed absurd, too good to be true. Jessie had learned long ago that when something seemed that way, it usually was. What's the catch? What would I have to do? Her voice hardened with suspicion and old fear. Nico laughed, the sound surprisingly warm. Smart girl. There's always a price, isn't there? He gestured around the room. My family has businesses, legitimate ones and others. We need loyal people in both. I'm not going to kill anyone, Jessie stated flatly, earning another laugh from Nico and a surprising smile from Anastasia. Or sell drugs. Or whatever else you might think a desperate kid would do for a roof. We have plenty of people for those jobs, Anastasia said, placing a gentle hand on Jessie's arm. What we lack are people we can trust. People with good instincts and quick thinking. People like you. A tall man with a medical bag entered the room, nodding respectfully to Nico, before turning his attention to Anastasia. Mrs. Caruso, I need to examine you now. 9 minutes without oxygen. It's unprecedented that you're even conscious. As the doctor led Anastasia to an adjoining room, Nico rose and gestured for Jessie to follow him to his study. The wood-paneled room smelled of leather and cigars, with bookshelves lining the walls and a massive desk dominating the space. Let me be direct, Nico said as he closed the door. I run the Caruso family. My father did before me, his father before him. We control shipping, construction, waste management, and other interests across 3 states. Jessie stood awkwardly in the center of the room, her worn sneakers leaving faint damp marks on the plush carpet. You're the Mafia, she said bluntly, the words escaping before she could reconsider them. To her surprise, Nico nodded, unperturbed by her directness. An oversimplification, but not inaccurate. We prefer family business. We protect our interests, our territory, and most importantly, our people. And you want me to be one of those people. It wasn't a question anymore. The reality of the situation was crystallizing in Jesse's mind, simultaneously terrifying and strangely compelling. Because I saved your wife. Nico moved to a cabinet, withdrawing 2 glasses and a crystal decanter filled with amber liquid. Because you're alone in the world, clearly intelligent, remarkably brave, and now you know things that make forgetting about you impossible. The implication hung heavy in the air. So it's not really a choice, Jessie said, her voice flat. Either I join your family or I become a liability. Is that it? She tensed, suddenly very aware of how isolated they were in this room. There's always a choice, Nico corrected, pouring a small amount of liquor into each glass. You can walk away tonight with enough money to start fresh somewhere else. But that life, always running, always hungry, always afraid, is that really living? He handed her one of the glasses, the gesture surprisingly respectful for their vast difference in status and power. A toast to new beginnings, he suggested, raising his own glass. Whether you stay or go. Jessie hesitated, then took the glass. She sniffed the liquor cautiously. Whiskey, expensive from the smell, but didn't drink. I need to understand exactly what you're offering, and what you'd expect in return. Smart girl, Nico approved, setting his own glass down untouched. I'm offering legal guardianship until you turn 18, then employment, education through college if you want it, and the protection of my name. Legal guardianship? Jessie repeated skeptically. How would that even work? I'm in the system. There's paperwork, background checks, home studies. She'd seen enough foster placements to know the bureaucratic tangle involved. A smile touched Nico's lips, not reaching his eyes. Paperwork can be managed. Obstacles removed. By tomorrow afternoon, you could be legally under our care with all the proper documentation in place. The casual confidence with which he dismissed the labyrinthine foster care system was both frightening and oddly reassuring. This was a man accustomed to bending systems to his will, to making the impossible happen with a word. What about the Petersons? Jessie asked, thinking of her former foster parents. They get paid to keep me. They'll report me missing if they haven't already. The thought of her former foster father still made her skin crawl. Something dangerous flickered in Nico's eyes. They'll sign voluntary termination papers. Trust me when I say they'll be highly motivated to cooperate and then forget they ever knew you. The threat was veiled, but unmistakable. I don't want anyone hurt because of me, Jessie said quickly, though a small, dark part of her couldn't summon much concern for the man who had used her as a punching bag for months. Pain is rarely necessary when fear is an option, Nico replied with a dismissive wave. Now, what else concerns you? Ask your questions. This is the moment for transparency between us. Jessie set her untouched drink aside. What happens when I turn 18? What will you expect me to do for the family business? This was the crux of it. What kind of life was she really being offered? That depends on your talents and interests, Nico answered, moving to sit behind his desk. We have legitimate enterprises that need bright minds. The restaurant chain, the construction company, the import business, all real, all profitable. And the other businesses? Jessie pressed, unwilling to accept vague assurances. The ones that aren't so legitimate? Would I be expected to participate in those too? She needed clarity, needed to know exactly what lines she'd be crossing. No one in my organization is forced to break laws they're uncomfortable with, Nico stated, his tone suggesting this was a point of pride. But everyone understands loyalty and discretion. Some things you may see or hear. Stay quiet. Look the other way, Jessie finished for him. I understand that part. I've been in foster homes where that was the rule too. She'd learned early to pretend not to notice things. It was safer that way. Nico's expression changed subtly, a new respect evident in his eyes. You understand more than most then, but there's a difference here. You'll have power in this arrangement. Real power. Protection. Resources. A family that stands behind you. A knock at the door interrupted them. A man with salt and pepper hair and military posture entered, bowing his head slightly toward Nico. Boss, the doctor wants to speak with you. About Mrs. Caruso. Concern flashed across Nico's face, the first genuine emotional crack Jessie had seen in his carefully controlled expression. Stay here, he instructed Jessie before following the man out, closing the door firmly behind them. Alone in the study, Jessie's first instinct was to search for an escape route. Old habits died hard. She moved to the window, finding it overlooked the lake where everything had changed just hours ago. The water was dark now, silvered with moonlight, deceptively peaceful. Somewhere beneath that calm surface lay the fishing lines that had nearly claimed Anastasia's life. Would have claimed it if Jessie hadn't been in the right place at the right time. Her own reflection stared back at her from the glass. Thin face, wary eyes, clothes now dry but still wrinkled and stained from months of hard living. Behind her reflection, she could see the luxury of the room, the life she was being offered. This was her moment of choice. The backpack by the door contained everything she owned in the world. She could grab it and be gone before they returned, disappearing into the night, back to the hunger and fear and loneliness she knew. Or she could stay, accept this bizarre twist of fate, becoming part of a criminal family, yes, but also finding a home, safety, perhaps even purpose. Neither choice was perfect. Neither was entirely clean. The door opened again, revealing Anastasia rather than Nico. She'd changed into silk pajamas, her damp hair now dry and loose around her shoulders. Despite her ordeal, she moved with natural grace. "The doctor says I should have brain damage," she said without preamble, closing the door behind her. 9 minutes without oxygen. It's impossible that I'm standing here talking to you, functioning normally. She crossed the room to stand beside Jessie at the window, both of them looking out at the dark water. Yet here I am, alive, breathing, thinking clearly. A miracle, they're calling it. Do you believe in miracles, Jessie? No, Jessie answered honestly. I believe in luck, good and bad. I've seen too much of the bad kind to put much faith in divine intervention. She'd prayed enough as a child, with little evidence anyone was listening. Anastasia smiled, the expression warm and genuine. Before today, I might have agreed with you, but now, she touched her throat gently, as if still feeling the water that had filled her lungs. Now I'm not so sure. She turned to face Jessie fully. I know what Nico has offered you. I know you're weighing your options, trying to determine the lesser evil. I understand that calculation better than you might think. You weren't born into this, Jessie guessed, seeing something familiar in the woman's eyes. A knowledge of life before, of choices made that couldn't be unmade. You chose it too, like I'm being asked to do. Anastasia nodded, leaning against the windowsill. I was a law student when I met Nico. Bright future, conventional path. I knew exactly who he was, what his family did. I made my choice with open eyes. Do you regret it? Jessie asked. The question direct, necessary. Being part of this world, this family, all the things you must have given up? She needed honesty now, more than comfort or reassurance. Sometimes, Anastasia admitted, her candor surprising. There are compromises, shadows, complexities I never imagined. But there's also loyalty deeper than you'll find anywhere else in the world. Protection that never falters. Love that isn't conditional. She reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind Jessie's ear in a surprisingly maternal gesture. I've never had children of my own. It wasn't in the cards for us, but I've always wanted a daughter. The words hung between them, heavy with implication and unexpected emotion. I'm not looking for replacement parents, Jessie said carefully. I've had too many of those already. Most not worth remembering. Not replacement, Anastasia corrected gently. New, different. A family you choose rather than one forced upon you. There's power in that choice, Jessie. Power that no one can take away from you. The door opened again and Nico returned, his expression unreadable as he glanced between the two women. The doctor says you need rest, he told his wife, his tone gentler than Jessie had heard from him before. The doctor says many things, Anastasia replied with a dismissive wave. Did he also tell you it's scientifically impossible that I'm standing here? That by all medical knowledge I should be dead, or in a permanent vegetative state? Nico's jaw tightened. He mentioned that, yes. Which is why you need to rest, Stasi. We don't know what delayed effects might appear. The concern in his voice was genuine, a crack in the armor of the powerful man. I'll rest when our guest has made her decision, Anastasia insisted, turning back to Jessie. Stay the night at least. Sleep on it. Give yourself time to think clearly, without hunger or exhaustion clouding your judgment. It was a reasonable suggestion, the first step without committing to the full journey. One night, Jessie agreed cautiously, but I keep my backpack with me, and I want the door to lock from the inside. Nico's mouth twitched with something that might have been amusement. Trust doesn't come easily to you. Good. It shouldn't. You'll have a room with a lock, your backpack, and no obligations until morning. A young woman in a neat uniform appeared at the door. This is Alma, Anastasia explained. "She'll show you to a guest room, bring you anything you need." She stepped forward, and before Jessie could react, embraced her briefly. "Thank you for my life," Anastasia whispered, her arms surprisingly strong around Jessie's thin frame. "Whatever you decide tomorrow, I will never forget what you did today." The simple gratitude felt more honest than all the grand offers that had come before. The guest room was larger than any bedroom Jessie had ever occupied, with a canopied bed, plush carpet, and a bathroom with a shower that had more settings than seemed necessary. It felt like a hotel from another world. Jessie locked the door behind her, testing it twice before setting her backpack on a chair near the bed. The security was more psychological than practical. If these people wanted to get to her, a simple door lock wouldn't stop them. She showered for what felt like hours, watching months of grime disappear down the drain. The hot water never ran out, another luxury she'd forgotten existed. Clean towels, soap that smelled expensive, shampoo that left her hair silky, small miracles after so long without. In the drawer she found new clothes, simple t-shirts, jeans, even underwear still with tags. They had been prepared for guests, or perhaps purchased hastily while she ate dinner. Either way, they fit well enough. Exhaustion hit her suddenly, the adrenaline of the day finally draining away and leaving bone-deep weariness in its wake. The bed was almost too comfortable, too soft after months of sleeping on concrete, under piers, in abandoned cars. She fought sleep, forcing herself to think through her options. Stay, and become part of a criminal family. Leave and return to homelessness with a slightly fatter wallet. Neither choice was ideal. Both carried risks she could only partially calculate. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper from the past. Water can save you or kill you. Respect it, but don't fear it. Today, water had nearly killed Anastasia, but in saving her, had the water somehow saved Jessie too? The philosophical question was still circling in her mind as sleep finally claimed her, pulling her down into the deepest rest she'd experienced in months. No nightmares came, no sudden starts at unfamiliar sounds, just darkness and peace. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through curtains she'd forgotten to close. For a disoriented moment, Jessie didn't remember where she was, reaching instinctively for her backpack with the panic of someone who owned nothing else. It was still there, untouched on the chair, and beyond it, through the window, she could see Clearwater Lake gleaming in the morning sun. The events of the previous day came rushing back, the rescue, the offer, the choice that awaited her. A soft knock at the door startled her. She pulled on the new jeans and t-shirt before answering, finding Alma waiting with a breakfast tray. "Mrs. Caruso thought you might prefer to eat in your room," the maid explained, her accent lightly Hispanic. The tray held eggs, toast, fresh fruit, and coffee. A simple breakfast compared to last night's dinner, but still more luxurious than anything Jessie had eaten in recent memory. Her stomach growled at the sight. "How is she?" Jessie asked, as she accepted the tray. "Mrs. Caruso, after everything yesterday." She found herself genuinely concerned about the woman who had nearly died in her arms. Alma's expression softened. "The doctors are amazed. No damage they can detect. She is calling it a miracle, saying you were sent to save her." The maid crossed herself quickly. Many in the house are saying the same. Jessie felt uncomfortable with the religious interpretation, the implied divine purpose. It wasn't a miracle, just luck and swimming lessons. She set the tray on a small table by the window, suddenly less hungry despite the delicious aromas. "Sometimes those are the same thing," Alma replied with a gentle smile. "Mr. Caruso has asked to see you when you're ready. No rush. Enjoy your breakfast." She departed with a small bow, closing the door softly behind her. Jessie ate slowly, savoring each bite while watching the activity around the lake house. Men in suits coming and going, security personnel patrolling the grounds, cars arriving, others departing. A well-organized operation in constant motion. When she finally made her way downstairs, she found Nico in a different study, this one overlooking the front drive rather than the lake. He was on the phone, speaking rapidly in Italian, his tone sharp and authoritative. He gestured for her to enter, but held up a finger indicating she should wait. Jessie stood awkwardly, taking in the details of the room. Awards from civic organizations, photos with politicians and celebrities, all carefully arranged to present an image of legitimate success. Nico ended his call and set the phone aside. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, the question oddly normal given the circumstances. "Alma said you enjoyed your breakfast." His manner was different today, less intense, more casual. Yes, thank you, Jessie replied automatically, manners from an earlier life resurfacing. Where's Mrs. Caruso? Is she feeling better? She was surprised by how much she wanted to see the woman again. Anastasia is resting on doctor's orders. She wanted to join us, but I insisted. Nico gestured to a chair across from his desk. Please, sit. We have some things to discuss if you're staying, and some arrangements to make if you're not. The moment of decision had arrived. Jessie sat, taking a deep breath. If I stay, she began cautiously, I need certain guarantees about my future, my education, what will be expected of me. Negotiating from a position of weakness was hardly ideal, but it was all she had. Nico nodded, seeming neither surprised nor offended by her conditions. Name your terms. We'll see what can be arranged. There was respect in his tone, acknowledgement of her right to establish boundaries. I want to finish high school, go to college if I choose, have options beyond just the family business. Jessie spoke quickly, afraid her courage might desert her. And I want legal documents, real ones, not forgeries that could fall apart. Reasonable requests, Nico agreed, making notes on a legal pad. Education is important to this family. Anastasia has 3 degrees herself. As for documentation, everything will be completely legal, I assure you. He looked up from his writing, eyes sharp. What else? Don't hold back now. This is your moment to establish the ground rules. The invitation was genuine, a surprising concession of power in their unequal relationship. I won't participate in violence, Jessie stated firmly. I won't carry a gun or hurt people or move drugs. I'll keep secrets if I have to. Look the other way sometimes, but I have limits. This was her moral line in the sand. Nico considered her words, tapping his pen against the legal pad. Not everyone in this family carries a gun, Jessie. We have accountants, lawyers, restaurateurs, legitimate business people. You'll find your place among them. He set the pen down, folding his hands on the desk. But understand this. The protection of this family extends to you, only if you're part of it. Half measures won't work. You're either in or you're out. The ultimatum hung in the air between them. Not threatening, but simply factual. The rules of this world were absolute. The boundaries clear. I understand, Jessie said finally. I'm in, under the conditions I've outlined. Relief flickered briefly across Nico's face, quickly masked by his usual composed expression. Good. We'll begin making arrangements immediately. By tonight, the paperwork will be filed showing Anastasia and me as your legal guardians. The speed was dizzying, a reminder of the power this man wielded. Systems that had trapped Jessie for years would bend to his will in hours. That fast? Really? She couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. When you have the right connections and sufficient motivation, bureaucracy becomes remarkably efficient, Nico replied with a thin smile. Judge Brennan owes our family several favors. He'll expedite everything. A knock at the door interrupted them. Anastasia entered, looking remarkably recovered despite the doctor's orders to rest. She wore a simple sundress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup highlighting her natural beauty. You should be resting, Nico admonished, though his tone held more affection than anger. The doctor was very clear about... He stopped, as Anastasia waved away his concerns with an elegant gesture. I've spent enough time horizontal for one lifetime, she said, moving to stand beside Jessie's chair. Besides, I wanted to be here when she made her decision. She looked down at Jessie with genuine warmth. And? She's staying, Nico answered before Jessie could speak. Under certain conditions regarding education and participation in family business. He handed the legal pad to his wife, who scanned the notes with an approving nod. Smart girl, Anastasia murmured, setting boundaries from the start. She handed the pad back to her husband. I'd like to add one condition of my own. Swimming lessons twice weekly with me. Your technique saved my life, but it could use refinement. The offer startled a laugh from Jessie, the first genuine laugh she'd experienced in months. The sound felt foreign in her throat, rusty from disuse. I'd like that, she agreed, surprised to find she meant it. Excellent, Anastasia said, satisfaction evident in her voice. Now for practical matters. You'll need clothes, school supplies, personal items. We'll go shopping this afternoon, after I've spoken with Principal Warner about your enrollment. The mention of school sent an unexpected jolt of anxiety through Jessie. I've missed almost a year, she admitted. I might be behind. She'd always been a good student before her life fell apart. The thought of failing now was unexpectedly painful. We'll arrange tutoring, Anastasia assured her, seemingly unsurprised by Jessie's concern for her education. You'll catch up quickly. Intelligence isn't your problem, just opportunity. That's changing today. A phone rang, and Nico excused himself to take the call in the corner. His voice dropped to a murmur, the conversation clearly private despite their presence in the room. Jesse noticed how Anastasia deliberately didn't listen, a practiced courtesy. "There's something you should know," Anastasia said quietly, taking advantage of Nico's distraction. "About yesterday, about me." Her expression turned serious, her voice dropping so only Jesse could hear. Jesse leaned closer, instinctively understanding the need for discretion. "What is it?" she asked, equally quiet. Something in Anastasia's manner suggested a confession, a truth not widely shared. "When I was underwater, tangled in those lines, I wasn't just drowning," Anastasia began, her eyes distant with the memory. "I was gone, dead by any medical definition. No heartbeat, no brain activity, nothing." She touched Jesse's hand, her fingers cool despite the warm room. "I saw light, felt peace. All the cliches you hear about near-death experiences, they were real. I was transitioning to whatever comes next. Then I heard a voice, a young woman's voice saying, 'Not yet, not today.' And then suddenly I was being pulled upward, back into my body, back into pain and panic and the burning in my lungs." Her eyes locked with Jesse's, intense and questioning. "It was your voice, Jesse, but you never spoke those words aloud yesterday, did you?" The question wasn't really a question at all, but a statement of certainty, of knowledge that defied rational explanation. Jessie shook her head slowly. "No, I didn't speak until we reached the shore." The implication sent a chill down her spine despite the warm room. "That's not possible. It had to be your imagination. Oxygen deprivation can cause hallucinations." Anastasia smiled, the expression knowing and somehow ancient. "That's what the doctor said too. A hallucination. A trick of a dying brain. But I know what I experienced." She squeezed Jessie's hand once before releasing it. "The family has always believed in signs, in fate," she continued, her voice still low. "Old superstitions from Sicily that seem foolish in the modern world, until something happens that can't be explained any other way." Nico finished his call and returned to the desk, seemingly unaware of the intense exchange that had occurred in his absence. "Everything is proceeding as planned," he announced, satisfaction evident in his tone. "The Petersons have been contacted," he continued, a subtle hardness entering his voice at the mention of Jesse's former foster parents. "They've proven remarkably cooperative. All necessary papers will be signed by noon." 3 days later, Jessie stood in what was now officially her bedroom. Not a guest room, but her own personal space in the Caruso Lake House. The transformation was still disorienting, like waking up in someone else's life. New clothes filled the closet, books lined the shelves, and a laptop sat on the desk by the window. All the trappings of normal teenage existence, provided with an efficiency that bordered on frightening in its thoroughness. Her school enrollment had been processed with similar speed, her academic records mysteriously recovered despite her months off the grid. She would start classes on Monday at Westlake Preparatory Academy, a private school where the Carusos were generous donors. The backpack, her old life condensed into a single container, now sat in the bottom drawer of her dresser. She couldn't bring herself to discard it, even as every passing day made it seem more like an artifact from another lifetime. A knock at her door revealed Anastasia, dressed casually in slacks and a blouse. "Ready for our first lesson?" she asked, gesturing toward the lake visible through Jessie's window. Perfect day for swimming. The idea of returning to the water that had nearly claimed Anastasia's life seemed morbid, but Jessie nodded anyway. Some demons needed to be faced directly, and the lake was now central to both their stories. They walked together down to a small private dock, separate from the larger one where the rescue had occurred. Anastasia moved with the confidence of someone completely recovered, though occasionally she touched her throat absently, as if remembering. "I used to be afraid of the water as a child," Anastasia confessed as they stood at the dock's edge. "My father threw me in when I was 5, said I'd either swim or sink. Old country methods." She smiled wryly at the memory. "Did you swim?" Jessie asked, already suspecting the answer. Anastasia didn't strike her as someone who sank easily, then or now. There was a resilience to her that went beyond physical strength. Eventually, Anastasia admitted with a small laugh, after swallowing half the Mediterranean and scaring 10 years off my poor father's life, he never tried that approach to teaching again. She stepped onto the dock, her bare feet confident on the warm wood. Water requires respect, not fear. It's the perfect teacher, unforgiving of carelessness, but rewarding of proper technique, rather like life itself. The philosophical comparison might have seemed pretentious from someone else, but from Anastasia, it felt genuine. She was a woman who had faced death and returned with insights that couldn't be easily dismissed. They spent an hour in the water, Anastasia correcting Jesse's self-taught stroke with patient guidance. Despite the near tragedy that connected them, the lake felt welcoming today, the water cool and clear in the late summer heat. As they dried off afterward, a black SUV pulled up to the main house, disgorging 4 men in suits. Even from a distance, Jesse could see they moved with the deliberate purpose of those on serious business. Nico's associates, Anastasia explained, noting Jesse's attention. They won't disturb us. This part of the property is considered private, off-limits for business discussions. Her tone suggested this boundary was strictly enforced. Do they come often? For meetings, I mean. Jessie tried to keep the question casual, though she was intensely curious about the mechanics of the family business she'd agreed to join. Anastasia considered the question carefully before answering. Regular meetings, yes. Strategy, territory, investments, a business like any other in some ways, more complex in others. She didn't elaborate further, maintaining the line between inclusion and protection. As they walked back toward the house, Jessie noticed subtle security measures she'd missed before. Cameras disguised as lighting fixtures, ground staff whose watchful eyes betrayed their dual purpose, the strategic positioning of the few entrances. The household operated with the quiet efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Staff appeared when needed, and vanished when not, maintaining the illusion of privacy while ensuring every need was anticipated and met. Jessie had never experienced this level of service before. Meals appeared without having to be requested, laundry disappeared dirty and returned clean and pressed. The bathroom was magically restocked with toiletries before anything ran out. It takes some getting used to, Anastasia commented, noticing Jessie's observation of a maid discreetly refreshing flowers in the hallway. The constant presence of others while maintaining the fiction of privacy. It's a delicate balance. Does it ever feel, invasive? Having people always around, watching, listening? Jessie had spent months valuing invisibility, the freedom of going unnoticed. This constant observation, however benign, felt constraining. You learn to create mental privacy when physical privacy is limited, Anastasia replied thoughtfully. Though I insisted on certain spaces remaining truly private. My studio, our bedroom, and now your room. Not even staff enter without explicit permission. The distinction was meaningful, a recognition of boundaries within the closely monitored world they inhabited. Thank you for that, Jessie said, genuinely appreciative of the consideration. It helps. Everything still feels a bit overwhelming. Anastasia touched her shoulder lightly. It will for a while. When I first married Nico, I felt like I was drowning in a different way. In expectations, traditions, unwritten rules. But you adapt. You find your place. The parallel to Jessie's current situation wasn't lost on either of them. How long did it take you to feel like you belonged? The question revealed more vulnerability than Jessie had intended, but she couldn't take it back. Longer than I expected. Less time than I feared, Anastasia answered with characteristic honesty. The turning point came when I stopped trying to fit into their world and instead carved out my own space within it. That's what I'd advise for you, too. Before Jessie could respond, Nico appeared in the hallway, his expression tense despite his attempt at a neutral greeting. Ladies, you've had a productive morning, I see. The observation was pleasant enough, but something in his manner suggested distraction. Something's happened, Anastasia said, reading her husband's expression with the ease of long intimacy. She didn't phrase it as a question, merely waited for confirmation or denial. Nico nodded slightly, his eyes flickering briefly to Jessie before returning to his wife. Business matter. Nothing urgent, but requiring attention. The Pellegrini situation has developed. His words were carefully chosen, revealing little. I see, Anastasia replied, understanding far more than was explicitly stated. Jessie and I were about to have lunch. Will you join us, or should we expect you later? The normality of the question belied the tension suddenly present. Later, I'm afraid. Carlo is waiting in my office. Nico touched his wife's arm briefly, a gesture of affection and reassurance, before nodding to Jessie and continuing down the hallway with measured steps. As they prepared lunch in the sunlit kitchen, Anastasia insisting on making sandwiches herself rather than calling for the chef, Jessie wrestled with curiosity. The exchange had been deliberately opaque, excluding her while acknowledging her presence. You want to ask about what just happened, Anastasia observed, slicing tomatoes with practiced precision. about the Pellegrini situation, about why Nico chose those specific words. Her perception was uncanny, almost uncomfortable. Jessie nodded, accepting a knife to spread mayo on the bread. Is it something I should know about, or something I shouldn't? The line between inclusion and ignorance was still unclear in her new position. The Pellegrinis are another family, with interests that occasionally conflict with ours, Anastasia explained, her tone matter of fact. There's been tension recently over a shipping terminal. Territorial dispute, essentially. She arranged the sandwiches on plates with the chef's attention to presentation. Nico mentioned it in front of you deliberately. A first step in trust, acknowledging business matters without excluding you entirely. It's progress. The realization that the exchange had been calibrated specifically for her benefit was both unsettling and oddly touching. I'm being integrated, gradually. The process was more methodical than she'd anticipated. Precisely, Anastasia confirmed, setting their lunch on the terrace table overlooking the lake. Too much information too quickly would be overwhelming and potentially dangerous. For you, and for us. Trust builds in layers like varnish on fine wood. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the sounds of birds and distant boats creating a peaceful backdrop that seemed at odds with discussions of territorial disputes and rival families. The contrast was jarring, yet somehow fitting. When Nico says family, he means it in two ways, doesn't he? Jessie observed, piecing together the dual meaning that permeated every conversation. Blood and business, intertwined but not identical. Anastasia's approving smile confirmed the accuracy of the insight. Very good. Yes. Family by blood, family by oath, family by marriage, family by adoption. Like you. Different paths, same destination, same obligations and protections. And the business side, the organization. That's what people mean when they say. Jessie hesitated, uncertain whether the word was acceptable in polite conversation within these walls. When they say Mafia? An oversimplification, but not inaccurate, Anastasia replied, echoing Nico's earlier assessment. Though we prefer La Familia, or simply the business. Words have power, and some carry unfortunate Hollywood connotations. The distinction seemed semantic, yet crucial, a way of framing their world that acknowledged its nature, while rejecting external characterizations. So what exactly does the family business do, besides shipping terminals and territorial disputes? Outside on the lake, a patrol boat with the Caruso family crest moved along the shoreline, its crew scanning the water and surrounding woods with practiced vigilance. Jessie had quickly learned that security was never an afterthought here. It was woven into the fabric of daily life, as natural as breathing. The boundaries between legitimate and illegitimate enterprises blurred in conversation, much like the misty line where lake met sky on foggy mornings. What outsiders might call criminal, the family viewed as necessary adaptations to a system that had never fully accepted their existence. Anastasia's hands moved expressively as she spoke, the diamond on her wedding ring catching sunlight. A ring, Jessie had learned, that had been in Nico's family for 6 generations, passed down through a lineage that valued blood and loyalty above all earthly possessions. Anastasia considered the question carefully. Import, export, construction, waste management, protection services for businesses in our territory, dispute resolution outside traditional legal channels, financial services for those who cannot access conventional banking. The euphemisms were transparent yet effective, describing criminal enterprises in the language of legitimate business. And all of that requires enforcement? Men in suits who make problems disappear? Jessie pressed, wanting clarity about the world she'd entered. Some problems can't be solved with contracts and handshakes, Anastasia acknowledged, neither confirming nor denying the implication. But violence is inefficient, draws attention, creates more problems than it solves. It's a last resort, not a first option. She sipped her iced tea, studying Jessie over the rim of her glass. You're trying to reconcile your image of organized crime with what you're seeing here. A normal family having lunch, discussing business like any other. It's not what I expected, Jessie admitted, thinking of gangster movies and true crime documentaries that had shaped her preconceptions. Less dramatic, more ordinary in some ways. The mundanity was perhaps the most surprising aspect. Most of life happens between the dramatic moments, even in our world, Anastasia said with a small smile. The movies show the shootouts and betrayals, not the Tuesday afternoon meetings about waste management contracts or property tax assessments. A phone rang inside the house, and moments later Alma appeared at the terrace door. "Mrs. Caruso, there's a call for Miss Jessie, from Westlake Preparatory, about her enrollment." The maid's expression revealed nothing beyond the message itself. Jessie looked to Anastasia, uncertain whether to take the call or let her new guardian handle it. The school had no way of contacting her directly yet. No phone, no established relationship. The call going through the house line was a reminder of her dependent status. "Take it in the study," Anastasia suggested, apparently reading her discomfort. "Educational matters are your domain. We'll support decisions you make about your academic path." The delegation of authority, however small, felt significant. The call was brief, but consequential. Placement tests scheduled for Friday. Course selections to be finalized. Uniform requirements explained. The administrator's voice held no curiosity about Jessie's sudden appearance in the Caruso household, only brisk efficiency. "Everything in order?" Anastasia asked, when Jessie returned to the terrace. The question was casual, but her eyes were attentive, gauging Jessie's reaction to this first official interaction with her new life. "Placement tests on Friday. They want to see where I stand after being away." Jessie couldn't quite keep the anxiety from her voice. "What if I'm too far behind? What if I can't catch up?" "You will catch up," Anastasia stated with such conviction that doubt seemed foolish. "We'll arrange tutoring, whatever support you need. Academic excellence is non-negotiable in this family. Education is power, independence." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of car engines on the main drive, multiple vehicles arriving simultaneously, moving with purpose rather than the casual pace of social visitors. Jessie tensed instinctively, reading the energy shift. Alma appeared at the doorway again, her composure slightly fractured. "Mrs. Caruso, Mr. Caruso requests your presence in his office. Immediately." The emphasis on the last word conveyed urgency beyond the simple message. Anastasia rose smoothly, all casual relaxation vanishing in an instant. "Of course. Jessie, please wait in your room until we call for you." Her tone brooked no argument, the instruction clearly a security measure rather than a suggestion. Jessie nodded, understanding intuitively that questions would be unwelcome in this moment. She made her way upstairs quickly, noting the increased presence of security personnel in the halls, their hands positioned for easy access to concealed weapons. From her window, she could see the source of the disturbance: 3 black SUVs and a police cruiser parked in the circular drive. Men in suits and uniforms stood in tense clusters, body language suggesting confrontation rather than cooperation. Her heart rate accelerated, old instincts flaring to life. Police meant questions, system involvement, potential recognition. Had someone connected her to her official identity? Was her fragile new arrangement already in jeopardy? A knock at her door startled her away from the window. Carlo, one of Nico's closest associates, stood in the hallway, his expression grave. "Miss Jessie, Mr. Caruso asks that you join them downstairs. There's a situation requiring your involvement." The formal phrasing didn't mask the seriousness of the request. Jessie followed him through the house, noticing how other staff melted away from their path, creating an isolation corridor that felt deliberately orchestrated. The main study had transformed into a scene of barely contained tension. Nico sat behind his desk, Anastasia standing beside him with perfect posture that betrayed nothing of her thoughts. Across from them sat a middle-aged woman in a severe suit, flanked by a uniformed police officer. "Miss Reeves?" the woman began, consulting a file on her lap. "Or should I say, Jessica Porter? We've been looking for you for quite some time." Her tone combined professional concern with underlying suspicion, the voice of authority confronting perceived deception. Jessie froze, her assumed name stripped away in an instant. 8 months of careful anonymity collapsed with a single sentence. "How did you find me?" The question escaped before she could consider its implications. "Anonymous tip," the officer provided, his expression neutral but watchful. "Someone called the hotline, said you were staying here. Given the nature of the household, we felt immediate intervention was warranted." The implication was clear. A runaway minor in the home of a known crime family triggered automatic red flags in the system. The officer's hand rested casually near his weapon, betraying tension despite his professional demeanor. "Jessica has been legally placed in our custody," Nico stated calmly, sliding a folder across the desk. "All paperwork was filed and approved 3 days ago. Judge Brennan signed the guardianship order personally. The social worker, for that was clearly her role, accepted the folder with visible skepticism. That's highly irregular, Mr. Caruso. The normal home study process takes weeks, sometimes months. Background checks, interviews, inspections. Nothing about this situation is normal, Ms. Winters, Anastasia interjected smoothly. Jessica saved my life last week. Our petition for emergency guardianship cited exceptional circumstances, which Judge Brennan recognized as valid. Ms. Winters examined the documents with growing disbelief, finding every signature, stamp, and certification perfectly in order. These appear legitimate, but I must verify their authenticity, and I need to speak with Jessica privately. Of course, Nico agreed, gesturing toward an adjoining room. Officer Ramirez can remain in visual contact through the glass partition, ensuring everyone's comfort while maintaining appropriate confidentiality. The compromise was diplomatically presented but left no room for negotiation. Ms. Winters hesitated, then nodded curtly. This way, Jessica. She gathered her files and moved toward the indicated room. Once alone, the social worker's professional facade softened slightly. Jessica, are you here willingly? Are you safe? You can speak freely. Her concern seemed genuine despite her initial suspicion. I'm here by choice, Jessie confirmed, maintaining eye contact to convey sincerity. The Carusos have been kind to me. Better than... She trailed off, the memory of her last foster placement still raw despite the intervening months. Your file indicates you ran from the Peterson home 8 months ago, Ms. Winters prompted, consulting her notes. There were no reported incidents, no complaints filed. What made you leave? The question triggered a flash of anger. No reported incidents? Are you serious? Jessie pulled up her sleeve, revealing a faint scar along her forearm. Mr. Peterson gave me this with his belt buckle. Mrs. Peterson saw it happen and said I provoked him. Outside the window, Jessie noticed Nico speaking with one of his men, his gaze occasionally drifting toward the room where she sat with Ms. Winters. Even from this distance, she could feel his protective vigilance, a foreign sensation after months of having no one watching over her. The social worker's eyes lingered on the scar, professional detachment momentarily giving way to genuine compassion. In her decade working within the system, she'd seen too many similar marks. Too many children failed by the very institutions designed to protect them. A clock ticked steadily on the wall, marking seconds of silence as Ms. Winters processed this new information against the pristine record of the Peterson home. Somewhere in the house, Jessie could hear the faint sounds of security personnel communicating via radio, the Caruso household shifting into defensive formation. Ms. Winters' expression shifted, professional skepticism giving way to a more personal concern. Did you report this to your caseworker? There's nothing in your file about abuse allegations. She made a note in the margin of her documents. I tried. Twice. Was told I needed evidence beyond my word. Jessie's voice remained steady despite the painful memories. After the third time he put his hands on me, I decided the streets were safer. Turns out I was right. Ms. Winters made several more notes, her expression troubled. The Petersons were considered exemplary foster parents. 5 stars in our system evaluation. This is concerning. She closed her file with a decisive motion. Your current situation is highly unusual, Jessica. The Carusos have no prior history as foster parents, and their background would normally disqualify them automatically. Her gaze drifted to the window where Officer Ramirez watched vigilantly. But the paperwork is legitimate, and you're clearly not being held against your will. And at 17, forcing a placement would likely just result in another runaway situation. Her pragmatism was refreshing, after months of dealing with inflexible bureaucracy. She sighed, making one final note. I'll be conducting monthly wellness checks, unannounced, and you'll need to maintain perfect attendance at school, with acceptable academic performance. Any issues, any at all, and we'll revisit this arrangement. Relief washed over Jessie, the immediate threat of removal receding. Thank you. I promise I won't give you any reason to worry. The words were sincere. This second chance meant everything to her. When they returned to the main study, Officer Ramirez was already standing, apparently having received some communication during their conversation. We need to go, Ms. Winters. Another call just came in. The social worker nodded, gathering her belongings with brisk efficiency. Mr. and Mrs. Caruso will be in touch. Jessica, remember what I said. With that terse farewell, the pair was escorted from the property, their vehicles disappearing down the winding driveway. As the door closed behind them, the tension in the room dissipated tangibly. Nico loosened his tie with a gesture of controlled frustration. Someone tipped them off. Someone who knew you were here. The implication hung heavy in the air. Who else knows I'm staying with you? Jessie asked, mentally reviewing the limited interactions she'd had outside the household in the past few days. Very few people, Anastasia replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. The legal team, the household staff, the doctor who examined me after the rescue, the school administrators, a handful of our most trusted associates. Nico moved to a cabinet, pouring himself a small measure of scotch. Someone in that circle either talked carelessly or deliberately. Either way, it's a security breach that needs addressing. The calm delivery didn't mask the seriousness of his intent. What happens now? Jesse asked, uncertain whether the crisis had truly passed or merely changed form. They'll be watching us, won't they? Looking for any excuse to step in again. Now, Nico said after taking a measured sip from his glass, we accelerate your integration, make you so firmly part of this family that no one, not social services, not the police, can question your place here. His expression softened slightly as he looked at her. Are you prepared for that, Jesse? Once we take the next steps, there's no going back. You won't just be living under our roof, you'll be Caruso in all but blood. The weight of the decision settled on Jesse's shoulders, heavier than she'd anticipated when she'd agreed to stay. This was more than guardianship or sanctuary. It was identity transformation, permanent allegiance. What exactly does that mean? Being Caruso in all but blood? She asked, needing clarity before committing to this deeper level of integration. Half measures and ambiguity had no place in such a decision. Nico exchanged a look with his wife before answering. It means a formal ceremony, witnesses, oaths, recognition by the other families, protection that extends beyond legal guardianship to something more encompassing. It means learning our traditions, our history, Anastasia continued, moving to stand beside Jesse. It means accepting responsibilities along with privileges. It means being held to the same standards as any born Caruso. The prospect was simultaneously terrifying and oddly appealing. After years of temporary arrangements and provisional acceptance, the permanence offered a stability Jesse had almost forgotten could exist. When would this happen? Through the window, Jesse could see additional cars arriving, sleek black vehicles with tinted windows that screamed both wealth and discretion. Men in suits emerged, greeting each other with the formal respect of old alliances, their casual movements belying the power they collectively wielded. The reality of what she was stepping into crystallized in that moment. This wasn't just a family, but a dynasty with centuries of tradition, blood oaths, and carefully guarded territories. Yet something in their loyalty to one another called to the abandoned part of her soul that had been searching for belonging. From somewhere in the house came the sounds of final preparations. Crystal glasses being arranged, voices giving instructions in rapid-fire Italian, the subtle but unmistakable clicks of security protocols being implemented. The air itself seemed charged with anticipation of the evening's significance. Tonight, Nico answered without hesitation. The heads of the allied families are already gathering for the monthly council. We'll announce your adoption formally with all the traditional observances. Jesse's heart raced at the immediacy of the timeline. Tonight? But I don't know the traditions. The protocols. What if I make a mistake? Say the wrong thing? The fear of embarrassment, of failing at this crucial moment, was suddenly overwhelming. Anastasia squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. We'll prepare you. The ceremony itself is simple. It's the meaning behind it that carries weight. The words are just formalization of what's already been decided in our hearts. The sentiment might have seemed saccharine from anyone else, but from Anastasia, who had literally died and returned, it carried a resonance that transcended mere comfort. This woman had seen beyond the veil and returned with different priorities. Alma will help you prepare, Nico said, all business again. Appropriate attire, basic protocols. Carlo will brief you on the families who'll be present. You'll need to know who's who. Appearances matter tonight. The next hours passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Alma produced a simple but elegant black dress that fit Jesse perfectly, suggesting it had been purchased specifically for this occasion, further evidence of Nico's confidence in her decision. Carlo, surprisingly patient, walked her through a virtual family tree of the allied organizations. Names, territories, specialties, hierarchies. The Romanovs control the docks. The Argento family manages gambling and entertainment. The Bonetti group handles distribution. Remember their rankings. Respect flows upward, always. By early evening, the lake house had transformed. Staff moved with practiced efficiency, preparing the formal dining room for what was clearly no ordinary dinner. Security doubled, then tripled, positions established at every approach to the property. They're starting to arrive, Anastasia announced, appearing in Jesse's doorway in a stunning crimson dress that complemented her auburn hair. Are you ready? The question encompassed far more than physical preparation. Jessie took a final look in the mirror, barely recognizing the poised young woman who stared back. Gone was the homeless girl who'd hidden beneath the pier just days ago. In her place stood someone with purpose, belonging, future. I'm ready, she answered, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. The fear remained, but something stronger had risen to meet it. Determination, perhaps, or the simple human need to be part of something larger than oneself. The ceremony itself was both more and less than Jessie had imagined. No dark robes or blood oaths from Hollywood films. Instead, a solemn gathering of power brokers in expensive suits, their casual demeanor belying the authority they collectively wielded. Nico stood at the head of the long table, Anastasia to his right, the position of honor. Jessie was called forward, conscious of the evaluating gazes of 24 men and women who controlled enterprises worth billions, both legal and otherwise. This girl, Nico began, his voice carrying easily without being raised, saved what matters most to me in this world. She pulled my wife from death's embrace after 9 minutes underwater. A miracle, some have called it. But I don't believe in miracles, he continued, echoing words he'd spoken to Jessie days earlier. I believe in courage, in loyalty, in actions that reveal true character. This girl showed all three when she had nothing to gain and everything to lose. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the gathered guests. In a world where calculated self-interest governed most decisions, selfless action carried a particular weight, a currency more valuable than mere money. The old traditions teach us that a life saved creates a debt that can never truly be repaid, Nico continued, his hand resting lightly on Jessie's shoulder. But it can be honored, through acceptance and protection, through family. He turned to face Jessie directly. Jessica Porter no longer exists. That girl died in the foster system that failed to protect her. From tonight forward, you are Jessica Caruso, under my protection and name, with all the rights and responsibilities thereof. An elderly man at the far end of the table leaned forward, his accent thick with old-world cadence. Has she been told what this means? What she accepts by taking your name, Niccolo. Our ways are not for the faint of heart. She knows, Anastasia answered before her husband could speak, her voice carrying the authority that came from her unique position. She's made her choice with open eyes, as I did when I joined this family. The old man nodded, seemingly satisfied by Anastasia's vouching. Then let it be witnessed. He raised a glass in formal acknowledgement, an action immediately mirrored by every person at the table. A small box appeared in Nico's hand, opened to reveal a delicate gold pendant on a chain. The symbol etched into its surface matched those worn by several others in the room. An ancient Sicilian crest, Jessie realized, recognizing it from Carlo's briefing. This has been in our family for generations, Nico explained as he lifted the necklace. Traditionally passed from father to daughter upon her 16th birthday. You're a bit late, but the sentiment remains. With surprising gentleness, he fastened the chain around Jessie's neck. The pendant rested just below her collarbone, its weight slight but significant. Wear it always. It marks you as Caruso, protected and bound. The metal warmed against her skin, seeming to pulse with the history it carried. How many daughters before her had stood in similar ceremonies, accepting the weight of family legacy? The room fell silent, all eyes on this moment of transformation, this alchemical shift from outsider to blood. Jessie felt a strange certainty settle over her, as if the pendant itself carried some ancient wisdom that transferred through contact. The frightened girl who had hidden under piers and scavenged from dumpsters seemed like a character from someone else's story now. Around the table, the gathered family heads watched with expressions ranging from approval to calculation to genuine warmth. Their world operated on different principles than the one she'd left behind. Justice dispensed without courts, loyalty valued above all virtues, protection that extended beyond any system's boundaries. Anastasia stepped forward, holding something that caught the light. Jessie's mother's silver locket, retrieved from her backpack without her knowledge. Your past remains part of you, she said softly. We don't ask you to forget, only to move forward. With equal care, she placed the second chain around Jessie's neck, the two pendants hanging side by side, past and present, loss and gain, a visual representation of life's strange continuity through disruption and change. Jessica Caruso, Nico announced to the gathered witnesses, his voice carrying the weight of formal declaration. Recognized and accepted. Any action against her is action against our family with all consequences thereof. The traditional pronouncement triggered a response from around the table. glasses raised in acknowledgement, nods of acceptance. A few murmured "Benvenuto" from the older generation. The simplicity of the ritual belied its significance. What followed was a dinner of surprising warmth and occasional humor, the feared crime bosses revealing themselves as people with families, inside jokes, and human concerns beyond their business interests. A heavy-set man with a booming laugh regaled the table with stories of his grandson's soccer triumphs. An elegant woman in her 60s discussed art acquisitions with Anastasia. Business was mentioned only obliquely, through shared references and careful euphemisms. Jessie found herself seated between Carlo and a young man introduced as Philip Benetti, heir to one of the allied families. "First big family dinner?" he asked with a sympathetic smile. "It's overwhelming, I know. I was 16 at my first one. Does it get easier?" Jessie asked, keeping her voice low as she navigated the intimidating array of silverware before her. Knowing who's who, what not to say, all the unwritten rules, the question revealed more vulnerability than she'd intended. Philip considered thoughtfully. Not easier, exactly. More familiar. Like learning a language through immersion. One day you realize you're thinking in it without translating first. His insight suggested a similar experience of adaptation. As the evening progressed, Jessie became aware of subtle dynamics at play, alliances indicated through seating arrangements, status communicated through deference patterns, future intentions telegraphed through seemingly casual questions. A silver-haired woman near the end of the table studied Jessie with particular intensity, her eyes missing nothing as she whispered something to the man beside her. Later, Anastasia would explain this was Donna Eleonora, matriarch of the Belmonte family, whose approval carried weight equal to any 3 men in the room. Wine flowed freely, loosening tongues just enough for Jessie to glimpse the complex web of relationships underpinning the formal business arrangements. Beneath the polished veneer of respectable commerce lay generations of shared secrets, blood debts, and unspoken understandings. Servants moved silently around the periphery, their presence acknowledged only when needed, their ears presumably deaf to conversations that could topple empires or end lives. Jessie wondered if she would ever achieve that level of selective awareness, the ability to see everything while appearing to notice nothing. This was education of a different sort than she'd receive at Westlake Preparatory. Equally complex, equally demanding, but focused on the intricate power dynamics that governed a world most people pretended didn't exist. Later, as guests began to depart with formal farewells and final congratulations, Nico drew Jessie aside. "You did well tonight. Observed more than you spoke. Showed respect, without subservience. These are good instincts." His approval, unlike that of previous authority figures in her life, felt earned rather than arbitrarily bestowed. "Thank you for trusting me with this. With all of it." The gratitude encompassed far more than just the evening's ceremony. "Trust is mutual," Nico replied, his usual intensity softened slightly. "Remember that. This life offers protection, opportunity, family, but demands absolute loyalty in return. There is no halfway with us, Jessie." The reminder was unnecessary, but telling. Even in this moment of celebration, the underlying realities remained present. The warmth and acceptance were genuine, but so were the expectations and boundaries. "I understand," Jessie assured him, her hand unconsciously touching the dual pendants at her neck. "I made my choice at the lake. Everything since has only confirmed it was the right one." The certainty in her voice surprised even her. 3 months later, Jessie stood at the edge of Clearwater Lake, watching the winter sun glint off the now frozen surface. The transformation in her life since that fateful summer day seemed as dramatic as the season's change on the landscape. School was challenging but rewarding, her initial academic struggles giving way to growing confidence as intensive tutoring filled the gaps in her education. Her classmates, initially wary of the Caruso connection, had gradually accepted her presence. At home, and it truly felt like home now, she had found her rhythm within the complex household dynamics. Staff who had once been formal and distant now greeted her with genuine warmth. Security personnel who had watched her with suspicion now nodded respectfully. Anastasia had become a true mentor, their twice-weekly swimming lessons evolving into wider-ranging conversations about art, literature, and the delicate balance of maintaining individual identity within the constraints of family expectations. Nico remained more reserved, his approval communicated through actions rather than words. A thoughtfully selected book appearing on her desk, a comment to Carlo about her academic progress overheard in passing, resources made available without having to be requested. The pendant he'd given her during the ceremony rarely left her neck, now paired permanently with her mother's locket. Two halves of an identity that was neither entirely new nor completely continuous with her past self. Deep thoughts? Anastasia's voice interrupted her contemplation. She joined Jessie at the lake's edge, bundled elegantly against the winter chill, her breath forming clouds in the crisp air. Jessie smiled, no longer startled by her adoptive mother's uncanny ability to appear when her mind was most active. Just thinking about how much has changed, how impossible this all would have seemed if someone had described it to me a year ago. Life's most significant transformations rarely announce themselves in advance, Anastasia observed, her gaze following Jessie's to the frozen lake. They arrive disguised as ordinary moments, critical decisions made with incomplete information. The philosophical observation was typical of their conversations now. Anastasia's near-death experience had left her with a perspective that found meaning in seemingly random events, patterns in apparent chaos. Like diving into a lake to save a stranger? Exactly like that, Anastasia agreed, linking her arm through Jessie's in a gesture of casual affection that would have been unimaginable months earlier. One moment of courage, changing everything that followed. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the winter light play across the ice. The water is still under there, Jessie observed finally, flowing, moving, even beneath the frozen surface, just waiting for spring. Water can save you or kill you, Anastasia quoted, remembering Jessie's mother's wisdom. For me, it nearly killed me. For you, somehow it saved you. The parallels weren't lost on either of them, how close both had come to different endings. Reaching the lake house, they found Nico in his study, finishing a business call. He ended it as they entered, his expression warming subtly. "Good walk?" he asked, his attention focused on them rather than the paperwork spread across his desk. "Perfect winter day," Anastasia replied, unwinding her scarf. Jessie was philosophizing about water and transformation. Quite poetic, actually. The pride in her voice was evident, a mother celebrating a daughter's depth of thought. Thank you for following Jessie's incredible journey from homeless runaway to protected daughter of a powerful family. If you've been moved by this tale of courage, redemption, and second chances, please let us know in the comments which part of the world you're watching from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support means everything and helps us continue bringing these powerful real-life stories to light. Remember, like water, life can change direction in an instant, carrying you to places you never imagined possible.